Hi, I'm Councilman Kevin Kramer. Welcome to Four Seasons, District 11. I want to share with you today a little bit about what an ordinance that we passed in 2022 makes possible. And I really want to answer some questions for neighbors and folks who wander through and see what's happening in the yard here. At first there were some really serious questions about, oh my gosh, she's tearing things up and moving things around, and what's this gonna look like when she's finished? And I think if you take a look, you'll be really satisfied. It's really pretty, and it matches up precisely with what we had intended in 2022.
Welcome.
Isn't that really nice?
Thank you. It's been so fun. It really has. Seeing like the little seeds that I planted and growing into actual plants. And I can like grab some dill for dinner. I have a couple little herb pots.
So in 2022, we passed an ordinance that would allow for folks to do their front yard the way that a lot of folks were already doing their backyard. But you learned about that ordinance pretty quickly.
I did. As I learned about the ordinance is also when I got into native plants. So it's been a lot of learning and a lot of community interaction to get what other people are doing and what makes sense, and still do it within the bounds of the ordinance. And also, it's really important to me too that the neighborhood I live in enjoys this and finds value in it.
You know, you came to our attention.
I did.
At first when neighbors of ours were calling and saying, have you been over on Petty J? Do you know what's happening over there? That person has taken out all of the grass, and what's going on? And our response was, you know, we don't know, right? We haven't seen it, but we'll check and see what's going on. And so the typical response to that, of course, is we call codes and regulations and say, hey, what's happening there? And they came back and said, you know, this is what's happening on that property, and there's a lot going on. And they mentioned that you were looking at a natural garden. And so we dug out the ordinance and were able to come back and look and say, hey, everything we envisioned when we created the ordinance back in 2022 is part of her vision.
I've always liked landscaping. You always get the thing like, oh, I could never do that. I don't have time to help the earth, or that's not something I can do myself, but this is something I can do myself. It's a matter of when I pick out a plant, look for the native plants. I really tried to capture the spirit of it. I think it was written in a way where you want to lean on your community and you want to get knowledge from other people who have already done it and already experienced things. So when I was reading the ordinance, it's very supportive. It's very honed in on all of the benefits that it can bring, capturing water runoff, increasing diversity in the species that we have.
And so as you started into this, right, and realized what you had undertaken, you started reaching out to other folks around in the community to get some sense of how do I pull this off, right? It's Mariah's organization that brought this to our attention, you know, in 2022, and really did the background work to make all this possible. So I'd like to invite Mariah into the conversation. When this was first introduced to us, I should say, it was brought to our attention that there were a lot of folks in town who were doing this kind of work in their backyards. And like Stephanie, they had used all of the space they had. They wanted more. And the only way to do that was to move into front yards. And that's where we first met, is in the conversation around, so how do we do that?
There is a lot of different reasons to use the front yard. We started native plant landscaping in some people's front yards, and some neighborhoods had no issues and others did. And this is when it came to our attention that there was still that antiquated 10-inch rule that had just kind of been stuck on the books. If you plant it with intention and you're going to care for it, that's something you should be able to put in your front yard despite the height.
And this is the result.
Yes, absolutely. And not only does it open up all these new species that we can have in our front yards, but it also opens up allowing us to use our topography in different ways. I'm sure you probably had standing water issues prior to this, and or, you know, it's just mitigating a lot of different issues that we see not only in urban but suburban areas.
And then there's a community benefit that comes too, right? And it's not often that you get a chance to stop and talk to a neighbor, right? But when you're out here doing what you're doing, it gives people a chance to actually stop and chat.
One of my neighbors tells me that I think you're doing more for me than you. Like, I love looking at your garden and watching the progress. I knew probably I would meet code enforcement when I started. I intentionally tried to plan my projects where I could get it done within a reasonable time. So it took me 6 days to dig this out. I worked hard to get it done so it's not in a complete state of disarray. It really put me in tune with everything, and when I walk around, I know exactly where I can step, where everything is. And so I was like, look, I don't want to cause problems. I want to make this look acceptable, and so my neighbors like it. So my big thing was weeding. I spent a lot of time weeding. My hands hurt. What I really need to do is make sure I have it in defined borders and keep noxious weeds out.
Fortunately, some of what you ran into was a good bit of the conversation that was had back in 2022 when we were considering this ordinance. It came to us with exactly the things that you're talking about, right? That we have so many invasive species, and what really is a lawn and what should a lawn look like, right? And Metro government has been putting a lot of resources for some time now in trying to eradicate invasive species from our own properties. And so when we have an opportunity to support something like this, I think that gives us a good leg to stand on to say to our neighbors, hey, you know, this might be different than what they're used to, but look at it, first of all, it's beautiful. And I think more importantly, we're actually doing something that makes a difference, not tomorrow or next week, but 2 years and 4 years and 10 years from now. Our hope was that people would do the kinds of things you're doing, that it wouldn't be as simple as, hey, I'm gonna quit doing anything.
Traditionally, what we've kind of defined as value or property values is that perfect grass lawn. And I think we have expanded the value to the land of being different species, of being out in it, enjoying nature, and getting to have community with our neighbors out and about that we wouldn't traditionally have all the time with a grass lawn.
Well, I certainly appreciate the work you did.
Thank you.
To get the ordinance passed, and this is beautiful. Hope that folks see what you've done and aren't so overwhelmed that they might take this on,
Yeah.
that more folks might decide, you know, this is something worthwhile. We also would want our constituents to know, you don't have to do the whole yard. To me, this looks overwhelming. But if this is just too much, then, you know, pick a section, right? Do the research, find the native plants that work. It's a benefit to all of us. So I'm hoping that my constituents, folks who are watching, will recognize that this is an opportunity, one that takes a lot of work, but it's certainly worthwhile. So I appreciate you guys taking the time with me and sharing all of this. Folks have questions, they can reach out, 574-1111.